This is the story of the cake and the mallet. That's a little hammer. Once upon a time, a long time ago, there lived a young man named William and a young woman named Beth. William was a bit of a silly fellow, but he was happy and helpful all the same. Conversely, Beth was very clever. She spent her time learning to do all kinds of important things, like how to solve problems and how to grow food to eat. Even though they were very different, William and Beth were still really good friends. One day, William and Beth decided to set out to seek their fortunes. They set out in different directions, and consequently, they weren't sure when they'd ever see each other again. This is the story of William. William set out on his path, and before long he came upon a village. There, William saw a man he thought he could approach. When William told the man he was seeking his fortune, the man said, "Oh, you've come to the right place if you want to seek your fortune. I've got a lovely field you can buy, and there is an added benefit. You can have that wagon of tools, too. Inside it, you'll find all the equipment you need to build a house." With more assurances, William gave the man his money, took the wagon, and proceeded down the road until he found the field. Now, even though he was a bit of a silly fellow, William knew the first thing he had to do was build a house to keep him safe and warm during the coming winter months. Quickly, William approached his wagon in anticipation of all the work he needed to do. He looked inside with interest, but William, being a bit of a silly fellow, didn't recognize a single tool. He just stood there scratching his head, trying to assess the situation. "Well, you can't think on an empty stomach," was William's deduction, "so I better make my lunch and then I'll start on my house." Now, one thing I haven't told you about William is that as well as being happy and helpful and a bit silly, he had another important attribute. He was absolutely, undeniably the best cake baker in the world. He had a rigid tube for mixing up his batter, and then he would extract the batter from the tube using a special spoon. So he made up one of his cakes and put it on the fire to bake. Now, you've probably smelled a cake baking before, and you probably thought it was a good smell, right? Well, I can promise you, William's cake smelled 100 trillion times better than any cake you've ever smelled, because he was truly the best cake baker in the world. Now, just at that time, a fellow came walking along. He was a big man with strong muscles. Nevertheless, he felt tired and hungry because he'd been traveling for a long time. As he was walking, he smelled the smell of a cake baking. Immediately, he stopped and tried to figure out where the smell was coming from. He looked all around until he saw William sitting by the little fire. The man walked over and said, "Hi, friend, that smells like a mighty fine cake you're baking there." William looked up with surprise. He saw that the man looked tired and hungry, and he wanted to help, because he was a helpful sort of fellow. So he said, "Well, thank you. I'd be happy for your friendship. You're welcome to sit down by the fire and share this cake with me if you like." "That's very generous of you, sir," answered the man, and he sat down to eat. Inevitably, another fellow smelled the baking cake. He was a shy and quiet man, and he approached the fire reluctantly. As soon as William saw him, this man too was invited to join them at the fire and sample the cake. Finally, a young woman came along. Her name was Tricia, and of course, Tricia was invited to sit by the fire and eat cake with them too. And so they spent a good long while with those three visitors eating cake and William baking up more cakes. In fact, William began to wonder if they would ever cease eating. Finally, the visitors sat back and declared that William's cakes were the most wondrous, delicious cakes that they had ever tasted. Before long, the three visitors began to wonder how they might repay William for providing them with such a glorious lunch. "What are you doing on this field, friend William?" they asked. "Well," said William, "I've done something a bit silly. I've bought this field, and now I need to build my house so I can be safe and warm when the winter comes. The man who sold me the field gave me that wagon over there and said there were tools inside to build a house, but I don't know much about tools and building and such. I don't recognize a single tool in there, and I don't know how I'll build my house. "I can assist you," said the big man. "I can be of assistance," said the shy man. "I can help you too," said Tricia. And they all went over to the wagon. The big man picked out a shovel. He looked around and he said, "I'll dig a spot for your house right here, and I'll make a big basement for you to store your food and supplies in." The shy man picked out a big saw with good rigidity. He said, "I'll cut down trees and saw them into the wood planks you'll need for your house. I'll make sure they're thick so you'll be warm when the winter comes." Finally, Tricia picked up a mallet and said, "I'll hammer your planks in place to make your house strong so you'll have a safe place to raise your family one day." Furthermore, Tricia gave William a little wink and secretly pictured herself as William's wife. And so they set to work, the big man digging, the tall man sawing the wood into rigid planks, and Tricia hammering the planks into place with her mallet. William tried to act as an assistant whenever he could, but mostly he baked up lots of cakes, as many as his friends could eat. Before long, it came to the last day of work. When they were finished working, the big man and the tall man came up to say goodbye to William. William gave them each a cake to take with them on their journey. He saved one cake for Tricia. He planned to give Tricia the cake when he asked her to marry him. At that moment, Tricia was in the basement with her mallet and thinking about how she would like to have William for a husband. Just then she heard William call, "Tricia, come and get it. I've saved one cake for you." With that, Tricia gave a mighty swing of the mallet to hammer the last piece of wood on the ceiling of the basement. But do you know, it was such a mighty swing that mallet just stuck there. It stuck itself right into the wood on the ceiling of the basement. Tricia looked at it. She grabbed that mallet and she tried to pull it out. But as she pulled and she yanked, but it wouldn't move at all. She tried to decide what to do. But you know, Tricia was kind of a silly person too. So she just shrugged her shoulders and left that mallet there. And she hurried off to eat the last piece of cake. And of course she said yes when William asked her to marry her. After that, she forgot all about that silly old mallet. And you know, that mallet was stuck there for a long time after that. But that's for another story.